It is my pleasure to welcome John Mackey, who's joining us today from Austin. John is a pioneering business leader who has been listed as one of the most important entrepreneurs of our time by Fortune magazine, and many others have recognized his impact on our food consciousness in the US and beyond, on the health and longevity of our populations, and of course, the health of the food system as well. And John is also a pioneering thinker in terms of how business needs to transform. And so in this conversation, we will talk about his journey towards becoming a conscious leader, as well as co-founding the conscious capitalism movement. So John, welcome, and thank you for joining us today.
Glad to be here, Raj.
So let's start at the beginning. So tell us about how you came to start Whole Foods Market, and what made it unique and successful pretty much from the beginning.
The main thing is that I was just really young, and I was not. I never took any business classes. I studied philosophy and religion and literature and anthropology and psychology and pretty much a lot of humanities at the University of Texas, and never did graduate. But I got very interested in food. I got very interested in natural food, organic foods, healthy eating. I moved to this vegetarian co-op when I was 23 years old, and I had a food awakening. I got conscious I learned how to cook. I learned that what I ate really affected how I felt, how I slept, my energy levels, my health. And that was like, it seems obvious now, but back then it was total revelation. And I was so passionate about it that I wanted to start my own store. And my girlfriend that I met at the co-op, Renee, she was very enthusiastic about that. So we started a small store called Safeway back in 1978. We did that for 2 years, and then we relocated that store and merged with another natural food store that we were a friendly competitor with, and changed the name to Whole Foods Market. And I suppose what made Whole Foods unique in the early days, this was 1980 now, so 41 years ago, and was that it was one of the very first natural food supermarkets. It was a supermarket size store that just sold natural and organic foods. There were very few in the world at that time that did that had any size to them. So if you wanted to eat this way, we had everything you needed. And that in of itself was an innovation that had not really existed previously. So that store was hugely successful right from the beginning. It just took off. It exploded. Sales were amazing. And we had some challenges in the first year. We had a flood. We were 100-year flood zone that wiped us out. But that's when I first learned about stakeholders, was in that due to that flood. They didn't let us die. We should have died. It was a near-death experience, but the stakeholders rallied to our defense and saved it. And then we opened a second store so we would be less vulnerable to a future flood. And that was successful as well. And we've just been growing pretty much ever since. We're up, 525 stores now, I think, across the whole company.
Well, let's go back to that flood story, because that is kind of iconic in Whole Foods' history. As you said, you only had the one store which was really successful, and you had this 100-year flood on Memorial Day, and quite a few people died, and there was tremendous damage in the city of Austin. And the flood waters, I think, were about 7-8 feet high where the store was. Mm-hmm. And you came in the next morning, and I think some of your co-founders were there. And paint the scene for us. You had your employees there. The store was devastated. There was nothing left.
Yeah. I actually got to the store the night of the flood. Renee, the co-founder, my girlfriend, was closing the store down that night. So she told us about the flood waters rising. And we got over there, and Renee had to out of the store. So it was a little bit scary for her. We couldn't see much. We just figured that we didn't have flood insurance, so we didn't think we would survive. And we talked for several hours, and we just went home. And we came back the next day. In the light day, saw that the whole store was wrecked. The water had crashed in, knocked the doors down like a tidal wave, and it just knocked over everything in the store. All the fixtures were. It was just a combination, and then also in a flood like that, you get sewage lines backed up, and so we had all the food mixed in with sewage and water and dirt and and it was just total mess. So we began to clean it up because what else were we going to do? And we noticed that there were these people helping us that looked familiar, but they weren't actually our team members. They weren't our employees. And as we got a closer look, they were our customers. They were our neighbors that really loved Whole Foods markets, and they didn't want us to die, so they were doing a neighborly thing. They were helping us to clean up the store, and they helped us we actually got some new employees because some of the social worked really hard, and all of our stakeholders came to our aid. Our customers helped us clean up the store. Our team members worked pretty much around the clock for 30 days until we got the store open. We couldn't pay them, so they were counting on us getting open to get repaid. But we did get reopened, and we did repay their time, but they trusted us to do that. So front-end is new inventory. Investors put in new capital. The bank loaned us more money. And it's a kind of an interesting story about the bank, Raj. I don't know if you've heard this one before, but because I didn't find out about this till a few years ago. I was at a conference, and somebody that was there from the old Austin days, and he was in the banking business back then, and he said that was really quite a thing Mark Monroe did for you that year of the flood. And Mark Monroe was our banker, and I said, yeah, it's great that the bank loaned us the money. And he said, oh no, you don't understand. No, the bank turned that loan down. I mean, you were bankrupt. Your signature wasn't worth anything. He said, no, Mark personally guaranteed that loan. He said that I knew John Mackey would pay us back, even if it took him the rest of his life. He was never going to do that. So he trusted me and never told me. And that made all the difference in the world. So I don't think bankers are like that anymore, but this one was. And it was pretty incredible. So the stakeholders saved us, and I've tried to pay back the stakeholders ever since, because I feel like we owe our very life to them.
Yeah, I remember seeing pictures of people putting on bake sales and musical concerts.
Yeah,
to raise money for a for-profit business. Like I've never actually seen that. Right, so it's an incredible testimony to what the store meant in their lives.
They did. It upset some people who thought, this is a business. People shouldn't be making donations to a business. That offended some people, but he actually raised quite a bit of money, and we had big turnouts. I mean, the band that was playing for like the concert was, the head of the band was the cousin of one of our co-founders, Mark Skiles. So it wasn't as big a deal as people might think, but some people were offended by the idea that there could be a benefit for for-profit business. But it helped. It helped us get back open again.
Well, I think that illustrates one of your points, right? That we have this artificial wall between nonprofits and for-profits. That we think that nonprofits are virtuous and good, and for-profits are greedy and selfish, and not worthy of our support. But if you have a company with the kinds of values and purpose and so forth, that distinction is really meaningless, right?
Yeah, I think where people make a mistake is they think that the purpose of business is to make money, that that's why it exists. And the purpose of nonprofit is altruistic. It has a higher purpose to serve people. But that's an artificial constraint, an artificial division that's really not fundamentally true, because every business has potential for higher purpose. Every business is creating value. At the very least, every business is creating value for its customers. And therein, in that value creation, is the roots of its purpose, its higher purpose. And business needs to make money. Guess what? Nonprofits need to make money too. Otherwise, they're always continually taking in donations all the time. But both of them can have a higher purpose. So, and I've known people that do nonprofits that are kind of scams. I mean, they're just raising money, and that's the way they can pay themselves a salary. I've seen sort of a little tiny nonprofit that somebody's doing that's basically just raising money, and they're taking it out as a salary. So that's an artificial constraint. Business isn't greedy and selfish, and nonprofits good and altruistic. Both have the potential for higher purpose. Both need to make money. As you know, our friend Ed Freeman has that great metaphor about red blood cells, Raj, where my body has to produce red blood cells or I'll die. That's a fact. But it doesn't necessarily follow that just because I have to produce red blood cells, that the purpose of my life is to produce red blood cells. Well, similarly, every business needs to make a profit. If it doesn't, it's going to die. But that doesn't mean it exists to make a profit. Profit is the byproduct of its purpose. Profit is the result of creating value for other people.
Would you like to ask a question and unmute and see if we can hear you?
Thank you. Thank you very much for this conversation. You were in a question you answer about how trust changed in many parts, one part of your life. Do you think that if we can create a chain of trust among business and different, really make a difference and conscious capitalism could move forward faster? Do you think that trust is something that has a big impact on how business could behave now?
Trust is always on a continuum from I don't trust you at all to I trust you 100%, right? So I trust life better than I trust a stranger. But the whole economic system is somehow, it's actually dependent on trust. I mean, we make a trade and we assume that somebody's going to trade back with us. They're not going to cheat us. And the whole economic system is based on trust, ultimately. Trust is like the basis for it. Now, there's degrees of trust, and you have to be careful because some people will try to cheat you. But in a society that has a high trust society, that's pretty rare because people are concerned about their reputation, and they're concerned they'll get a bad reputation if they take advantage of someone. So we all live on people trusting us. We live on our reputation for being a trustworthy person who will honor our promises. And if we don't, then that reputation follows us as well, and people are less likely to do business with us. It's one reason we like to get references for people before we employ them, references before we do business with a landlord or supplier. Is this somebody we can trust, or are they going to try to cheat us down the road?
John, one of the interesting things that Whole Foods has, among many, is the Declaration of Interdependence, which is a beautifully articulated statement on your website. Can you tell us the history of that and how that came about? I know that there were employees involved in creating that, right?
That occurred back in 1985. We wrote the first iteration of our Declaration of Interdependence. It was led by a consultant that we brought in who ultimately came to work for the company and actually for a while was president of Whole Foods. That was Chris Hitt. And we just brought together, I think about that time, 1985, we had 4 stores, and 3 in Austin and 1 in Houston. And it was getting harder and harder for the 4 founders at that point, the 4 co-founders, Craig, Mark, me, and Renee. We couldn't be everywhere. And we needed to start creating systems. We needed to start creating the values and the principles that we were going to lead the company by so we could communicate that to new employees. When you can be present all the time, it's less necessary because you embody those principles yourself and people can follow your lead. But if you're going to grow a chain, if you're going to grow, then you need to begin to institutionalize those values. And the Declaration of Interdependence at Whole Foods was our higher purpose mission statement. It was kind of wordy at the time, but we got our core values in there. We got our higher purpose in there, and it's guided Whole Foods since 1985. So that's now 35, going on 36 years. That's been and anytime I've ever gotten in a difficult situation where I've been a little confused, I oftentimes go back and read the Declaration of Interdependence. And it's like, it reminds me about what we're all about and what we're trying to accomplish. So it's been very helpful, and I'm sure other people use it in a similar way.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that countries have those kinds of founding documents that embody what they're all about and their higher purpose.
Countries need a higher purpose too.
Yeah,
countries need higher purposes too. And so the Declaration of Independence is sort of the founding document for the United States that Thomas Jefferson wrote. That is I'd say the higher purpose of the United States is embodied in the Declaration of Independence. And it's well worth reading frequently because a lot of the values of the United States still exist today. The Declaration embodies those values.
Yeah. And that became a beacon for humanity, really. So that created a new template. Juan Carlos, would you like to ask something else for John?
Yes, please. Another practice, John, is future search. Could you explain us a little bit what is that about and how that practice is helping Whole Foods?
You asked about the future search?
Future,
is that what you asked?
Future search.
For many years, every 5 years, we would do a future search where we'd bring together the major stakeholders. We'd bring together selected customers, selected team members, selected suppliers, and selected investors. And together we would talk about how we wanted Whole Foods to evolve in the future, what the future would look like. So it was a time of collective dreaming. And it was very powerful because generally whatever we envisioned came true. So it was very powerful. It was, and in fact, we oftentimes exceeded the future search goals that we put forth every 5 years. We stopped doing it about, 7 or 8 years ago now. We haven't done a future search now for 7 or 8 years. And the main reason Whole Foods stopped doing it was hard to get good representatives from all the stakeholders together for us. No problem getting team members. They all wanted to come, and they all were very idealistic, and they wanted our company to be focused pretty much on them. Harder to get customers, and the customers that you get were people that maybe had time on their hands, and they might have had their own sort of idealism about what Whole Foods should be selling and shouldn't be selling. Suppliers didn't want to rock the boat too much. They didn't want to hurt their relationship with Whole Foods, so they would be a little cautious in terms of expressing their opinions. And shareholders, who would you get? We could try to get institutions to come, but they all have fiduciary responsibilities, and they always are a little bit nervous. So I found that the future search increasingly got more and more warped towards just team member issues. It was like, what's the point of this? It's very expensive to carry it on. But that being said, I think Whole Foods just got to a scale where it was less useful for us, at least in the way we were using it. But that doesn't mean I don't recommend it. We did 5 or 6 future searches, and they had an amazing impact on our company. And so for any business that's looking to chart its future, getting all the stakeholders together in the same room for a weekend retreat with a good facilitator can be very, very powerful. So I do recommend it. Marvin Weisbord wrote the book on the future search. We hired Marvin. He did the first 3 or 4 future searches for us, but he retired and got too old. I don't know if he might have passed on now. It's been a long time since I've communicated with him.
John, one of the interesting things I've heard you talk about is the value of dissonance. We all, in conscious capitalism especially, talk a lot about congruence and alignment of purpose and values and all of that. And then you spoke at one of our conferences about the need for dissonance, that if everybody is completely speaking the same way and saying the same things, that you actually need somebody to kind of create some degree of disharmony in that system so that you can innovate. Could you talk about that? Because that's not an intuitive idea for many of us.
Well, you just did, actually. That's pretty good. That's pretty good overview. If you have just group, any organization has a risk of groupthink, meaning everybody's thinking the same way, everybody agrees about everything. That makes for harmony. Harmony is a good thing. I'm not anti-harmony, but it also means stagnation generally, because to evolve, there's almost no exceptions where evolution can occur in many, many different ways, and everything's evolving in a way, but it always comes with disruption. It always comes with dissonance. It always comes with some disagreement, some type of viewpoints not being well represented. And it's the clash of those different ideas that helps people to get out of their ruts, helps them move forward, and helps them to innovate. So I think it's natural for me because I'm sort of naturally a provocateur. I naturally bring dissonance to a certain extent. I'm not the one that brings harmony. I'm the one that brings challenge. I'm the one that brings new possibilities that it may upset people because people want to be safe and secure. And reality of business is that it needs to, every business needs to be evolving and changing or it's going to get passed up. So there is no ultimate safety and security. And it's important that we realize that as business people, we should embrace evolution. We should embrace innovation. We should embrace change. And dissonance is critical for that to occur. I mean, I won't laundry any dirty laundry here in this thing, but I will say that it can be important in a merger too, that the acquired company, Whole Foods has been acquired. We've acquired 23 companies and we've been acquired once. I suppose you only get well, you can get acquired more than once, but it's generally one and done. And if that brings the potential for more dissonance, and it also brings an intense desire for many people to silence dissent because they want people to get along and go along. And I think that's a mistake. I think it's good to have disagreement. I think it's good to have arguments. I think it's good to disagree, and because I think that's how we make progress in the world. We make a big deal in the United States right now because the country's so alienated, and maybe we're a little bit too alienated. However, in the past, I'm a student of American history. It has been when Americans have primarily disagreed that that sets up the evolutionary advances that the society needs. So evolution occurs in societies and cultures as well. And dissonance is a big part of that evolution. Hopefully without going to war.
Right. One more, any other thoughts, questions for John?
Yeah, one question, John. How optimistic are you about conscious capitalism, and do you think it's going to be a normal way of doing business? And I would add, what do we need to happen for conscious capitalism to be the way of doing business?
Well, it is going to eventually be a normal way of doing business because it works better. Ultimately, whatever works better in business spreads. It works better. I'm not saying it's easier, it's harder, but it does work better. You get more creativity, you get more innovation, you get more purpose helps get higher energy, releases more creativity. Stakeholders, there are stakeholders and they are trading with the business. And so doing it more consciously is just good business. And so it's going to spread. In order for it to spread, as Raj and I realized this when we wrote Conscious Capitalism, is your business can't be any more conscious than the leadership is. The leadership acts as a lid on the potential consciousness of the overall company. But as the leaders become more conscious, then that enables other people in the organization to be lifted up. So I know from my own experience that I acted many times as sort of a check on Whole Foods' potential possibilities. And as I became more conscious, as I became more aware, that enabled the whole company to move forward. So it puts a particular high responsibility on the senior leadership, particularly the CEO. He or she needs to continue to learn and grow and evolve. And that's why I recently co-authored a new book called Conscious Leadership, which is about helping leaders to become more conscious and grow. If we get more conscious leaders, and God knows we need them in business, but we also need them in government, we need them in politics, we need them in education, we need them in healthcare, we need them in the universities, we need them everywhere. And if we will not have a conscious capitalistic culture until we have more conscious leaders. So conscious leaders are the key to it all, I think.
Well, John, the last thing I'll ask you is about the foundations. Whole Foods has, at last count, if I recall, about 5 different foundations. The whole planet.
No, we have 3 foundations. We have 3 foundations.
We have
Whole planet,
okay.
Whole kids,
yeah.
Whole cities.
Okay, and then the Global Animal Partnership was spun out, right?
That's not a foundation. That was and Whole Trade is not a foundation. Those are good initiatives that we support. Yeah. So I'm sorry, maybe I'm just picking your language. They're not foundations, but we set up some other nonprofits.
And you have an interesting perspective about those areas where they are integrated with the business in some way. They're all connected back to what the business is about. So can you talk a little bit about that, sort of the synergy between that domain of activity and the business itself, and why you got into some of those areas?
Well, I have a very simple theory about politics and philanthropy in a sense. I believe that anything business can make a profit doing belongs in the private sector. And business is what solves most of our problems. Make no mistake about it. Business is more innovative, has more capital. It is. If business can solve it, that's the place it should be. But there are some things business can't make a profit on. For example, protecting animals or protecting the environment. It's harder for business to make a profit doing those things. So those belong, whenever possible, in the nonprofit sector. It belongs in the parts of our society where you have NGOs and nonprofit organizations that can put that as their higher purpose, and they will be dependent on donations that come in. And then thirdly, you have government. There are certain things that neither the for-profit sector nor the nonprofit sector can solve, and so you need government to help solve those problems. Those could be things like climate change. You need work in all three areas, but you have to have government for something that's affects everybody, like climate change, or clean water, or just basically environmental type stuff. It's very important that you have government involved in that stuff. So all are needed, and they're all, I believe business, because business has competence and it has great talent within the organization, that it should have, it should also recognize it can support and help the nonprofit sector, that it has ideas, creativity, and talent. So I believe greatly in that for-profit businesses should partner with nonprofits. And that's what Whole Foods does with our foundations. We are partnering with nonprofit organizations. For example, the Whole Plant Foundation, which makes loans to the very poorest people in the world, makes loans to. And it's now in 77 countries. We've helped over 5 million people in the last 15 years. And we work with microfinance organizations that we vet all around the world. And these are places that we're trading with, by the way. These are communities that Whole Foods is buying food from all around the world. And so we're giving back to those communities by making microcredit loans through microfinance organizations that are institutionalized within those communities. So that's a win-win. We give them the money they need, and they're helping those communities to learn, grow, and develop, and they're helping people get much better lives for themselves. Same way with Whole Kids. Whole Kids is, we give away salad bars in our schools, and we give away gardens so kids can grow food, and also beehives, I might add, the pollinators. And we work with the schools are nonprofits for the most part, and we're working with those schools and helping them to get healthier food to our children. So we are partnering with these nonprofit organizations. We have know-how and creativity and money, and they've got local connections and good intentions and higher purpose. So those things link up very well together. I believe businesses should find nonprofits that align with their own mission. I mean, we're focused on food, and we're focused on trading in the communities that, or helping the communities that we're trading with and getting our food from. And so that's what I believe. And business can have such a positive impact, not just through the value it creates for its customers, but the social responsibility. It should just be done in a conscious way. It should further the mission of the company. It shouldn't be random. The philanthropy that Whole Foods does is completely consistent with our higher purpose. Our higher purpose of Whole Foods is to nourish people and the planet. And everything that we do philanthropically is consistent with that higher purpose. They work together.
Well, thank you, John. Any last words of encouragement, inspiration for our group of 100+ CEOs as they embark on this journey? And also they look to create a kind of collective manifesto and legacy. Like, what does business stand for in Colombia and in the region?
Well, I'll give a final words, because I think business is the greatest value in the world. Business creates far more value than all the nonprofits and all the governments combined, by exponentially far more value. And business is, we're the good guys. We're the ones that are the value creators. We're the ones that are helping the world make progress. We're the ones that take the scientific breakthroughs and then operationalize those and make those, through entrepreneurs, make those so they actually make people's lives better. We're heroes. We're the good guys. We're not these greedy, selfish people that are condemned by the intellectuals who've always disliked business. The intellectuals have always hated commerce. They hate it today. They're the enemies of business. They're the enemies of capitalism. And they believe in socialism. They don't think business is good. So my message to all of the business leaders out there is, understand that you are doing good in the world. Business is good, but you can make it better by engaging it, doing it more consciously, being a more conscious leader. And if we do that, the reputation of business will improve. We'll have capitalism waxing instead of waning, and we will together make the world a better place.
Wow, thank you very much, John. Really appreciate your time. Juan Mora, any last thoughts before we say goodbye?
Yeah, thank you, John. You are a real source of inspiration, and a proof that you can do well in every sense. Do well for all your stakeholders, be a successful business. So thank you very much for being such a leader and inspiration for all of us, and for taking this time to share your thoughts with us. Thank you very much, John.
Thank you. It's been an honor to talk with you today. I wish everybody the very best. Bye-bye.
Thank you, John. Thank you.